Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha. So, Namaste everyone. We are joined again by Bede after somewhat of a lengthy interval, and we'll be continuing our discussions on Vedanta and psychology in the light of Pujya Swami Dayanandaji's teachings. And the topic for today is Yoga as Sameness, which aligns to the Bhagavad Gita citation of Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. So, Bede, please uh, begin, and I'll ask you questions as they arise.
Okay, so one of the first things that that must be understood when approaching Swami Dayananda, as far as I'm concerned, is that Swami Dayananda unashamedly has a God-centered psychology. Okay, so it's not like a Western psychology separate from, that's enclosed within an individual and processes going in there. What we're always looking at is we're looking at the individual in relation to God. Okay, so, and the consequences of that relation or absence of relation. Okay, so when we look at the Hindu understanding of God, what we look at is they talk about Satchitananda. Now, if we paraphrase that in English, because I talk to English Western people, what we're looking at is that we're looking at the life, which is Sat, life, real life. This is real life, not our biological life. So there's life, light, which is illumination, which obtains in our life as wisdom, and fullness. And this light, and fullness is abidingly present and continually embracing us. Okay? We may not be aware of that fact, but that is what they call an epistemological issue. Okay, so God is not absent. So ontologically, God is not absent. But epistemologically, from our end, he's absent. If I'm not aware of the presence of God, it's as though God does not exist for me. Okay? So the thing is that what happens is, as human beings, we normally take our life and being to be our experiences. Okay? So what happens is that we're looking at life, light, and fullness, and this light, and fullness pervades the entire universe. Now, Swami Dayananda was constantly using this clay pot thing, and he's saying, he says it's not what you've got looking at when you're looking at a clay pot. You're looking at the presence of clay in the form of a pot. Okay, so, and likewise, or similarly, when we're looking at the universe, we're looking at the presence of God in the form of trees, concrete, cars, people. We're looking at forms, but those forms don't have independent existence. They don't have their own be. In other words, they're completely and utterly contingent on reality to have existence. Right? Now, okay. Swami Dayananda wasn't a spiritual whacker. He had four very important ontological distinctions, which solves a lot of problems, theoretical problems as well as practical problems. He says first category is reality itself. So this light, and fullness itself. Then he had the category of because we're looking there, and these four categories cover our entire existence. They're quite brilliant, really. Do you know what I mean? I've never seen them talked about by other people about like this. Then you've got what you would call it the snake and the rope. You've got falsity. You've got the existence of falsity. So he didn't say that, oh, there's no falsity because there's only God. Everything, but there is falsity. We know that. We can be seeing things that falsity destroys our understanding. So there's no light of understanding when there's falsity. So he didn't deny the fact of falsity. So and falsity has an existence. Is it absolute existence? No, it's dependent upon God. Okay, everything to have any existence depends on being. It's contingent existence, as St. Thomas Aquinas said. So you've got the second category, which is falsity. Then you've got non-existence. Okay, have you ever heard of these people say, "Oh, everything's unreal, the whole universe is unreal"? Do you know what I mean? Have you ever heard people say that? It doesn't really exist, right? Well, that's ridiculous. And so non-existence is a man with horns. It's not false. It's actually it's saying it doesn't exist, right? And he gave examples. God, for example, can't be in space because space is in God.
BG, one question. So how are you distinguishing false from non-existent in your, like, if you have to cite an example?
All right. So the thing is that, have you seen people who deny, for spiritual reasons, they say the world doesn't really exist. It's non-existent. It's unreal, right?
The new Vedanta types.
It's unreal. A man with horns, can that exist?
No.
Can God exist in space and time? No. Right. So it's the category of non-existence. It's just an important category because particularly the Neo-Advaitins who pervert the Hindu tradition with this, it only seems to exist, it doesn't exist. It's crazy. That's just crazy, right? So you've got reality, light and fullness. You've got falsity or error, delusion. You've then got non-existence. Do you know what I mean? Which is helpful in terms of looking at things. Now, then what you've also got is Dhyana says, you got a cup. Is a cup false? No, it's not false. No. Is it non-existent? No, it's there. You can drink it, right? So what is it? Now, why this is important is the Neo-Advaitins, what they do is they say there's only God, therefore everything else is false. Have you ever heard of that idea?
Yeah.
Or there's no existence except God, and therefore I'm God, and then they go nutty, right? Okay, so
in fact they even dismiss God because they say there is only the Atma. So even God is like false for them.
Yeah, of course. There's no God. We don't need to. We are God because there's only God. We are God. And all this nonsense, right? So then there is this existence, which is not real. It's not false. It's not non-existence. It's this intermediate existence. He called it mitya, which depends for its existence on something else.
Right.
So the relative world that we live in, we don't deny creation, right? But we understand its nature to be dependent on God.
Yes.
Okay. And this is this lovely saying that he says often, everything is given. Everything is given, right? Now this is, he even said you don't even have to have the virtue of humility. If you really understand with the spiritual understanding that everything is given, that'll free you from vanity, because you understand that every gift that you have, every insight you're given comes from God. And so you don't get puffed up, right? Now, this, if you look at the Indian culture, have you noticed that compared to other cultures, one of the things that stood out in for me is they have this tremendous, it seems to be part of their culture. They have this reverence for the sacred.
Yes.
I can't understand it, but because we don't have this.
Isn't that a very universal process to have reverence for the sacred? Like,
yeah, well, that's right. What's happened in the West is that we had our religious forms, but they are now have become meaningless because there is a pervasive, well, not only that, there's a tremendous antagonism to religion now. It didn't used to be. It used to be non-belief, but now there's an antagonism to it. Do you know what I mean? But the thing is that, and people, normally speaking, are materialists. They only see the world through material eyes. Right? The thing about Vedanta is it awakens our spiritual senses so that we can see spiritual facts. But I'll go into that in a minute, right? So what happens is you've got these, so you've got this relative existence, right? You know what I mean? That we don't deny. So I am an individual living in the world. We're not going to deny that. Now, the thing is that the basic principle of Vedanta is that I take my life and being to be my experience of my psychophysical functioning. I take life to be that, right? Yeah. But Vedanta says that no. Life, real life, is Satchitananda, or life, light, and fullness. Yes. That's real life. And that, you see, if you look at the word religion, it means bind. In other words, being bound back to your source. This journey back to where we really come from. What is our life really, as opposed to what seems to be, right? And so what we're looking at is that we're looking at, when we're looking at spiritual life, is a shift from the cognition, being enclosed in the cognition that my life and being is this physical entity in this physical world, right? And what it's got is it's gonna its destiny is old age, sickness, and death. So we take ourselves to be this physical entity, and then we're obsessed with self-survival and all of that stuff, right? The spiritual teaching is that our life and being actually is found in God. It's not in us. It's not me. It's not me, okay? It's not all about me, right? And this is the shocking thing when it comes to, when you see people perverting Hindu spirituality into this egoic self-glorification that I am God. Yes. You do what I mean? Because the fact of the matter is that I'm an individual, and what's clarified by Vedanta is, what is my nature? What am I really? And the fulfillment of Vedanta is the understanding that my life, my real life, is the life that is God.
So Bede, I want to ask a question here. So as you mentioned, you observe the trend, let's say the last 50, 40, 30 years, or whatever time period, where people have moved away from tradition. They moved away from names and forms. They moved away from worship, and they've dismissed the idea of God and replaced it with an egotistical, inflated version of the self, right? Which replaces, it fills that vacuum.
Yeah. The cognition of the sacred is absent.
Right. And so if, and earlier, I think in a session or two ago, we discussed how every great form of art is inspired by God, directly or indirectly. We talk about Mozart, we talk about some of our Vedic compositions, whatever they may be. It is the love, that fullness that you find within yourself is an expression of the order, which is Ishvara. And so if it is such an alluring fact that, the fullness is only to be found in God, then why would somebody be prone to give that up and replace it with something that's of lesser quality?
I don't think it's they give it up in one sense. You know how Swami Dayananda says we're born into ignorance? The thing is that we now don't have we're one of the first cultures that's non-religious. Do you know that? We're one of the first cultures that is just simply non-religious. So there is no, generally speaking, there is no sense of the sacred or cognition of the sacred. It's an epistemological issue. right?
So what I mean to ask is, all else being equal, and given that there are options available where one can choose to move towards the sacred just as a
Yeah.
natural course of being, or
Mhm.
move away from the sacred, why do we see the latter trend take over when the former seems to be the more natural approach to life?
Well, we now have a collective that's a collective, our education, our media, all of this stuff. We're in a collective environment that actively now, when it presents religion, it always presents it in the worst possible light.
Right, right.
Always now, like say, for example, you see in our Western tradition, they say that, man is made in the image and likeness of God. That's an important idea
Right.
because, and that means in our heart, there is the image of God, and that spiritual life is becoming that likeness of that image,
Yes.
right? That's gone in our culture now. But if the individual is sacred, then there's certain rights that go along with that and stuff like that. You see, if the being that you are is just simply as a consumer, right? Like what's happening in Canada now with this, with the euthanasia, people are being counseled. Would you like to die? Do you know what I mean? This kind of thing. So life isn't necessarily seen as sacred. If you're looking at human beings as just simply consumers, units of consumption, right? Which in our Western culture is basically what people are seen as objects to be
Right.
manipulated, so they buy and use more goods. It's quite ugly, really.
So this is
but
a very important point. Yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah,
what
please go.
Yeah, we have, there was, and we won't go into his theology because I don't agree with this theology, but Saint Augustine said a very interesting thing. He says, "Thou hast made us for yourself, O Lord, and we are restless until we rest in thee."
Mhm.
Now, if people, that feeling of wanting to go home, wanting to find goodness, wanting freedom, whatever you want to call it, that is a movement of the heart, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Right? It is not a psychological problem. But
Mm.
if that isn't a dynamic force in a person's life, right? If that's not a dynamic force, that is the context in which, when that is present within an individual, they are then open to the spiritual life, aren't they? Because they are seeking the ultimate satisfaction of their heart.
Mm.
You see what I mean? That their heart, not their, oh, I'm interested in Vedanta. No, 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 no.
So the implication of what you are saying is that this issue of moving away from the source to, for lack of better expression, or from Ishvara, is not a psychological problem, but doing so will lead to psychological problems.
Yes, that Dayananda used the word alienation. He says that we're alienated from Ishvara.
Right.
Okay, so because we're alienated from Ishvara, we can't help but be absolutely miserable. Imagine Ishvara is this beautiful spiritual sun
Right.
that's warm and enlightening, but I'm cut off from it. Therefore, I'm going to be cold. In my heart, I'm going to be cold, miserable, and there's going to be no illumination, none whatsoever. This is darkness. This is in all the spiritual literatures of all the great traditions in the world. They always use this darkness light business, right? So what happens? So what happens is that, how Dayananda talks about how the first step in the spiritual life is listening, shravanam, listening,
Yeah.
right? So what happens is, here I am, I'm Joe Average, and I'm caught in my thoughts about life. And I've got ontological assumptions, reality assumptions about who I am, who other people are, what the universe is, and what God is. Everyone's got these. And normally now there's no God. Other people are there for my use. And I've got to try and be as happy as possible before I cark it.
Right.
So now, in the act of listening, what happens is Dayananda says the greatest gift that we have is when we come before this teaching and we become a listener.
Right.
We're setting aside the usual judgments.
Yeah.
And we're being presented with a spiritual vision, so that what happens is we come into contact with spiritual facts.
Yeah.
With spiritual eyes. Normally we look at life with physical eyes, looking at physical reality. Agreed?
Right.
Right? So the whole purpose of Vedanta is to awaken our spiritual perception.
And would you say that the epistemological fruit over here of the dawn of knowledge, the wisdom that you arrive at through the shravanam, through the listening, requires the suspension of that judgment, or in other words, you require that shraddha. You need to be open-minded and accepting for truth to be considered truth, because if something were true but you close yourself to it, it's never going to be part of your knowledge base.
How Dayananda puts that is suspension of judgment pending discovery. Right? Because discovery, which this means to remove the covers, right? Do you see what I mean? The veil of materiality is very strong. Right? But Swami Dayananda understood, which we're getting onto a thing, he understood that in our core, because our real life at our core is life, light, and fullness, and that wisdom of God obtains in a human being as conscience or as Dharma.
Right.
Okay, so the fact of the matter is that in my inner core, right, like what you're saying before, in my inner core, there is this desire to be in harmony with life and to be in a harmonious relationship with other people. Now, we know this because when we act in a harmful way, we feel regret and remorse. If we didn't have that dharmic drive that comes from our heart, it's the core of the human being. We wouldn't worry about right and wrong.
So, Bede, here, would you say that there is some teleological engine that's driving us to actually become better than what we are, and being better implies moving towards Ishvara? Or it is the systemic brainwashing and the mixed messages and the bombardment of like the media and such, that and the institutions that are keeping us away from discovering the truth. But
yes,
left to our own devices, that's where we would move.
If without revelation from above, what happens is we're actively encouraged to conform to the collective. To conform to the collective.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a very powerful dynamic, but you have this other spiritual yearning that comes from inside.
Can I dig a little bit here for my own clarity? Because I think this is a very important point to just linger on. So let's say we have institutions which are keeping us from seeing this for whatever nefarious motives that they have. But at some point, this collective that is preventing us from finding the source of truth and the source of fullness, how did that collective itself develop? Because that would require a past cause, right? It would require a past collective to make them the way they were. And so what would be the initial, you can say...
Well, first of all, Dayananda doesn't quite see it that way.
Okay.
There's the form of the world and the collective, right? But he says that the problem is located with you.
Okay.
Right? So this is really important, because what we suffer from is not a sociological problem in being imposed on us. The real meaning of our suffering is that we are cut off from God. Right? So that's great, because that means that individuals can become free on that basis. Because if the cause of my spiritual condition is external to me, it's over. It's over. So what's important is that spirituality has to be related to the life of the individual. Have you heard of Soren Kierkegaard?
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I don't know much about it.
He was Lutheran, and he started existentialism, if you know what I mean, right? He would
German philosophy, isn't it?
no Danish, but what he said was the truth is never away from the situation of the knower.
Okay.
Swami Dayananda would agree to that, because you see, I have to awake as an individual. I have to awaken to the truth as an individual, and I have to awaken to the fact that I'm cut off from God. Now, but Swami Dayananda was quite clever about this, because first of all, to prepare our minds for spiritual truth. You know how, like I said before, about how we're made in the image of God, and spiritual life is becoming more of a likeness to that image.
Yeah.
So Swami Dayananda starts with Dharma, in the sense that, okay, I might be stuffed up, but normally what characterizes human beings is that they're caught up in conflict. Would you agree with that? They're upset about themselves, other people, or the world. They're caught up in conflict. They're not in harmony. Right? Now, here's an interesting idea of what harmony is. He says that when you're not conforming your conduct to right and wrong, first of all, there's a rupture in yourself. Of course it is, because if you're at variance of this inner image that is God in your heart, if your life is not aligned with that, if it doesn't align, can you see how there's a rupture inside?
Right.
So Swami Dayananda says that when you're not living a dharmic life, you have a rupture in yourself, and you come into conflict with the environment. We can see this, can't we?
Yes.
So what he sorry?
So you just cannot be at peace when that happens.
Right. But see what that does to our cognition. When we're caught up in angry and friction, what happens to the ability to see?
It's clouded.
Right. So his first step is this learning to live a life of Dharma. Right. Now, this is really important. The idea of right and wrong is attacked strongly now, because it's all opinion and all this stuff, right? So, but we won't go into that. But the thing is that, so what this means is that when you know how Plato talked about God as the good?
Yeah.
Right? We need, practically speaking, we need to move in the direction of the good, don't we?
Yes.
Right? So when I actually see, when my heart sees, you know what? If I lived in harmony with other people and myself, that would be good. Okay, even though I'm often a jerk and I do bad things and I say, you know, I may not be kind and all of this stuff, I can see that, you know what, it would be really good to live a good life. Right? In terms of conduct, not become a good person, because Dayananda wasn't into becoming. But in terms of conduct, if my actions become good, in other words, I may not feel kind, but I can act kindly, can't I?
Yes.
Right?
Biji, but question here. So isn't the main driver of people's motives in life more the pursuit of happiness than the pursuit of being good, typically speaking?
Well, Dayananda would say that the pursuit of good really is going to be what real happiness is. You see,
Right.
what you've got is you've got the compulsive pursuit of ego satisfaction. In our culture, we consider happiness and ego satisfaction the same.
Yes.
But that idea is that the thing is that if we live happily, we can be happy. Right? So, but that's living happily. It's a verb, isn't it?
Yeah.
So to learn to live happily is that where Dayananda's psychology is very helpful is this, that when I actually see the good of something or the value of something, I value it. In other words, my will is directed towards it then, isn't it?
Yes.
I can't help but be inclined from my heart to pursue what I really think is good.
Right.
So when we're talking about the spiritual life, when it is presented to us that living a dharmic life is really valuable, if I really see that it's valuable, I will have an inclination to live a dharmic life, even if I'm pretty messed up. Okay? And that's how it starts. Wisdom comes to us when we meet a teacher or a teaching, and our spiritual eyes open up and we go, you know what? It would be good to live a good life in terms of conduct. So what happens is, if I commit to a life of Dharma, is that first of all easy? Absolutely not. Right? But if I commit to a life of Dharma, now I'm going to be very sensitive to my conduct, aren't I?
Yes.
Right? Now, Swami Dayananda had 3 principles of living in terms of how to evaluate your conduct. This has helped me enormously in my life. And the first one is, in terms of conduct, don't act harmfully. Don't act harmfully. Now, this is really important. Have you ever talked unkindly to people, Prashant?
Yeah.
Have you ever?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Have you ever talked about people in an unkind way?
Yes.
Right. Now, when we do that, it feels right, doesn't it? I feel a satisfaction, because Swami Dayananda says every action is the satisfaction of a desire.
Yeah, it feels like a release, some pressure. There's some pressure, right? For you to say
Absolutely.
this.
So in terms of my ego self, it's very
Yeah.
satisfying to criticize and rubbish others, for example, right?
Yeah.
But what Swami Dayananda says, when you act in a way that's at variance with this core dharmic thing in your heart, something in you dies. But when you start to conform your actions to so that he says that the dynamic form of the basic person is love and care. Did you know that? The dynamic form. That's the form that's the manifestation of godly qualities, if you like.
Yes.
Right? So what happens is that I start to watch my conduct, and so when I conform my actions to Dharma, what happens first of all is, because the way I'm living and my heart come into alignment, I feel a certain kind of peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Or composure, if you like. This is incredibly important in terms of cognition of spiritual reality. Right? There's a direct relationship to my ability to understand and how I live.
And this life living, which is lived in accordance to Dharma, is also what enables you to drop the judgments, because the clouded mind, when you're listening to the teaching, the
Yes.
fog sort of gets away, right? Because now you're more clear-headed and you're able to see
Yeah.
more deeply.
There's a direct relationship between how I live and the quality of my mind. If I completely am governed by the pursuit of ego satisfaction, there is implicitly there a lot of trouble. But when I consciously and deliberately, provided I see, once I've got to first of all see that living a life of Dharma is highly useful and good for me. Dayananda said, we don't preach values, we preach the value of the value.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I see that it is going to be good, then we can't help it. You know how they talk about Krishna being like a perfume, like it attracts our attention?
Right. Yes. Yes.
So when we see the good, that creates a new will in us, doesn't it, towards that good?
Right.
But that striving, that will towards the good, comes from above. It doesn't come from everyday life.
Yes.
It comes through spiritual understanding. Do you see what I mean? So the first principle is non-harmfulness. The second one is to what he calls doing the needful. In other words, you're always facing a situation, and what you're going to do is you're going to respond to that situation in the best possible way. You're going to, by bringing value to that situation. Right? That's not a theoretical head trip, is it?
No.
Right? For example, if your wife is upset or your husband is upset, maybe it's what the problem is, what you're not doing. You're not responding in terms of what would be valuable.
Yes.
Right? So omission, if you like.
Yes.
Right? So do you notice how this non-harmfulness, once we start to see that we need to live a life of non-harmfulness, the first thing we're going to notice is how bloody harmful we are.
Right.
Right? When we're willing to be governed by Dharma, we will submit to it. And what I mean by submit to it, I notice I'm being neglectful, right? Now, and I'm seeing that as wrong. That actually is a dharmic perception. You see, a whole range of perception of our life opens up once we're pursuing the good of Dharma.
Right.
Because we'll see when we fall short, and then we can correct it. If I'm not interested in it, I'm just interested in me, I'll go, I'm feeling good about my wife now, I'm feeling bad about my wife now.
Right.
It's no good, right? So what we're looking at is, first of all, being non-harmful, beneficially contributive. Becoming a contributor is another way that Swami Dayananda put it. And the last thing is to try and be as non-disturbing as possible, right? That doesn't mean being a wimp.
Yeah.
It's just uselessly being disturbing, right? Now, because you know how have you ever seen that quote in our Western scriptures, by your fruits you shall know them?
No, I've not heard of that one.
Right, but basically spiritual life proves itself. That's what, when Kierkegaard said, the truth is not away from the situation of the knower. When I begin to live this way, which involves a struggle, by the way, right? Because I'm going to try and remain the same. So instead of what's happening determining how I see and act, I'm going to remain the same in terms of, I'm going to be steadfast in terms of Dharma. So no matter what happens, I'm going to be non-harmful, beneficially contributive, and less disturbing as possible.
Yes.
Now, if you think about this is what real freedom is. Because if you are determining how I'm going to respond to you, am I free, Prashant?
No.
No. So if you say or do something that I don't like, and I just simply, I don't know, idiot, I hate that guy, you know what I mean? Or I rubbish you to other people or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is I'm being determined, aren't I?
Yes.
I'm not being free. I'm a determined being, just exactly what Freud thought, that we're all determined.
The Puja Swamiji also has that quote, right? That you're only as free as the freedom you give to others.
That's exactly right. So if you stay, when we're talking about sameness, this sameness is, first of all, the value of being in harmony with life, the value of being in harmony with life. If I act unkindly, is that harmony or is it violence and conflict?
It's violence and conflict.
Right. Now, when I'm full of violence and conflict, resentment, hatred, when I'm living a life based on that, can I be open to the perception of the presence of love in my life?
No.
It's just not possible. So the thing is that what is often not understood, you see, like what we said before, the human problem, I'm not talking about severe things like schizophrenic or psychosis. I'm not talking about that. But ordinarily speaking, we don't have a psychological problem. We have a spiritual problem with a profound psychological consequence.
Yes.
So, for example, if I get into that, because my relationship with my partner is what happens between us in terms of action, right? That is, my relationship is my relating.
Yeah.
If I'm relating in a dharmic way, will I be building conflict into my relationship?
No, you'll be reducing it.
Right. But if I relate from my binding desires, that people should do what I want, that life should be this, to be that, and then I disregard Dharma and I just simply say what I feel and what would feel right, which doesn't necessarily mean because it feels right, it's good, right? What happens to the relationship if I just simply act as I feel? In other words, I live an unenlightened life in terms of Dharma. We know what happens.
Yes.
Relationships that get destroyed.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a very powerful teaching in the sense that the commitment to Dharma is the commitment to remaining the same. That I'm going to act, not feel, because we can't not controlling of our feelings, but I'm going to act in a loving and caring way. You know, when you see, when I'm concerned about the welfare of others, is that a good thing?
It is. Yeah.
Right. That's a dharmic striving. The very fact that I feel that even the fact that I can see that that's good, even if my life is messed up, I can see that I should be concerned about the welfare of others. Right? Have you ever been filled with ill will when you think of someone, Prashant?
Yeah.
See how there's a will. You want to harm them. That's human life. But
especially to agree.
Yeah. But when what Swami Dayananda says is that through this practice of Dharma, what happens is that we basically assimilate the value. In other words, it becomes valuable from our heart. So at the beginning, we operate by the principles of truth. Do you see what I mean? But when we assimilate the value, we act from Dharma, not by Dharma.
Yes.
Which is assimilated value. So in other words, he says that this is emotional maturity. You want to do what you need to do. Now look, isn't that interesting? The want. So now you're spontaneously wanting to be kind, not to be harmful, not to be, you see. So he considered in terms of preparation, this is very, very important to assimilate this value of living a life, a Dharma-governed life. And he says this is true worship of the Lord, by the way.
Absolutely, yes. So
You see
it's
what I mean?
more than following, is more of an embodiment. You become the embodiment of Dharma itself.
Yes, where you actually, you see, if you see something is really good and you're wholehearted with that perception, this is really good, you can't help but want it.
Yes.
The heart is changed because you've discovered what is really good. The only thing that changes us as human beings, there has to be a change in the heart or the will, doesn't it?
Yes.
That can't happen unless you see the value of the value. Right? So it has to be valuable to you. Right? So and this is where wisdom comes in. What Swami Dayananda unfolds is the value of this value. That basically you will never be happy unless you live a dharmic life. Now that goes so against, because in terms of my psychology, I'm a consumer. Give me. I want. Right? So, but he talks about the shift from being a consumer to being a contributor. In other words, the way to relate in life is to relate in a dharmic way. And he would actually say that this is liberty. When you are acting in the face of changing events, when you are acting in a dharmic fashion, you are exercising liberty. Of course you are. So, people say, I want to be free. Yes, I want to be free. Normally what they mean is I want to get what I want. Right? But what is suggested here is that above the striving for security and pleasure is the striving for Dharma. There's another striving above that, but we won't talk about it today. But the thing is that this category of right and wrong, have you ever heard people say there's no such thing as right and wrong?
Yeah.
Right.
Moral
Now,
relativism.
sorry?
Moral relativism.
Yes. But that means that, you see, that is because there's no cognition of the good of living a life of, you know how they say, have you heard that expression, all good comes from God?
Yeah.
Right? So, and Dayananda says that God is present in our life as Dharma.
Yeah.
Right? Because we know that God is goodness and truth itself, right? When I'm living the truth, I'm living that goodness.
Right.
Right? What I'm brought into harmony with God, aren't I? Or Ishvara, aren't I?
Yes.
Right? And so how can God become real to me if I'm living at variance to the core striving in my heart? How's that possible?
Right.
So Swami Dayananda sees this as an epistemological, because he's a Vedantin, he sees it as an epistemological issue. In other words, the how I am living my daily life has a direct impact on my ability to cognize spiritual facts.
Right.
And so one of the first wisdoms, if you like, that he unfolds for us is that we need to live a life of karma yoga. And he calls it living a life of Dharma. Now, but we need to have this related to God. You see, if we understand that God becomes present in our life as Dharma, in other words, when I am actually living a good life, he says you discover love in loving. Have you heard him say that?
Yes.
Yeah, Dinah, you discover love in loving.
Yeah.
The idea that I can just simply act and live exactly the way I want to, and it doesn't have a consequence. You see, how important is us to awaken to the presence of this light and fullness that's embracing us all the time? How important is that?
Extremely important.
Exactly, because that's the only thing that will satisfy the fourth striving, which is the longing for the absolute or the God or God.
Yes.
But without Dharma becoming important in our life, we can't possibly. Do you see how it has an epistemological impact?
Yeah.
It's just not possible to awaken to the presence of God while you're being hating, resentful, apathetic, and striving for physical sensations and ego satisfaction.
Yes.
Right? So this is an important and this, so what, you know, in our Western tradition we call it the Plato the good.
Yeah.
You see how that the very fact that I can see, that I can open my eyes to the fact that, okay, I might be messed up, my life might be in conflict, but I can see that if I live in harmony, I can see, part of me can see, yes, this would be good.
Yes.
Right? Once I see that it's good, I will then have a will towards it, won't I?
Yeah.
The birth of a new will. This is the beginning of the transformation, if you know what I mean. Without seeing the value of the value, you will not strive towards it.
Yes.
Right? But once you've seen the value, Dayananda says we need two things, and this applies right across the board in our whole Vedanta journey. He says you first of all have to have the wisdom, which is the recognition of what is true and good, right? That's always the wisdom, is a recognition of what's good.
Yes.
But he says you then have to live that wisdom.
Yes.
Right? So you can't have it both ways, right? Because the laws work the way they work. God's love embraces us unconditionally. That's fantastic. But I won't be aware of it if I'm living my life.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? What he says is that you have to live in Ishvara's world, not your own. He says your problem is you're full of yourself instead of full of Ishvara.
Yes.
But you're not going to. So have you noticed that, for example, you might see suddenly that you've been unkind? Have you ever had that? You're suddenly pulled up because you see you're being unkind.
Yeah.
Do you know that's the intelligence that is God obtaining in you as a new way of seeing? Do you know that? It's
No,
very,
yeah,
very intimate.
yeah,
It's very. What happens is the wisdom that is God obtains in you as your way of seeing. It's non-dual, you see. That's the whole point with non-dualism. It's not like I'm an empty bucket and something's put inside me. What happens is when I'm drawn into alignment with God, I start to become intelligent. I see things. I see I'm being unkind. But if I didn't value Dharma, would I see the unkindness?
no,
No, she's just being an idiot. Whatever it is whatever. So coming back, it's so important to understand this measures us. Like every day I see my uncaring and my unloving acts. Every day. Now, is that bad? No. That's the light of Dharma saying, turn around, Bede, reorientate your life.
right.
So because Swami Dayananda wasn't into this perfectionist thing. He didn't think we could become perfect.
Yeah.
But we're learning to live a life of Dharma.
Yeah.
Right? But without Dharma, without virtue, which is an unpopular term these days, right? There is no spirituality. I can know all about Vedanta and all of this sort of stuff, right? But what I need to do is to be able to invite the presence of God into my life. When I'm living a life of Dharma, that's what I'm doing actually. Because I'm making my actions conform to this inner image, aren't I? I'm becoming a likeness of this image. That's how we put it in the West.
That's right.
Right? But if without this, there's no hope, Prashant. If we think that we don't have to, first of all, we have to expose our life to our mind to the wisdom by suspending judgment, so we actually have a recognition of what is good. Ooh, okay, to be good to live in harmony. Okay, all right. Then, because I've recognized, and that's a wisdom in me, I now have an inclination, not a wholehearted inclination. I'm not at that emotional maturity that Swami Dayananda says, I want to do what I need to do. No, I'm not that yet, but that's okay. But because I have to go through this assimilation process.
Right.
This is a beautiful teaching. There's no man like Swami Dayananda. Like it, in terms of, there's none. This is not written about really, but this has to be emphasized, because without it, there is no freedom. Freedom is living a life of Dharma, because then you're not being determined. And he said, when you want to do what you need to do, you are free. Of course you are. But he said at the beginning, there's friction. There's a friction between what I want and what Ishvara wants, or Ishvara demands, if you know what I mean. Whether I like it or not, if my life does not conform, if I am not being loving and caring, I have fallen away. I'm not living a life that's proper to my nature. Proper in Latin means property, ownership, what belongs to my nature. Do you see what I mean? So this is the core starting point, but you see its relationship between. We all want to awaken to the light and fullness of God. People say, I want to awaken to the presence of God. Well, okay, that's good. That's very good, right? But that is not possible unless I start to go on this journey, because then I can awaken more and more to it, because the intelligence of God will start to operate in me, showing me my non-dharmic acts.
Yes.
Sometimes people don't like God coming in like that because they feel made wrong, but he's always coming in like that. And the thing is that and the more you respond to it, the more that will start to operate in your life. But it doesn't operate in the sense that, oh, you're a wonderful, warm human being and you're just full of light, love, Satchitananda. No, it comes in as a revelation of how far you have fallen away. But that's the kindness of God, because it's asking you to turn, isn't it?
I think you need to see where you are before you realize where you need to go. And so if you don't know the current state, then there's no progress.
No progress. We have to. we have to, this is what Swami Dayananda says, it's important to be alive to facts. He said, we don't want positive thinking or negative thinking. We want a thinking that covers reality.
Right.
Do you see how I can only turn from non-dharmic acts if I see them as non-dharmic?
Right.
That's a gift. That's a gift of the teaching, actually. Do you know what I mean? That becomes sharper and sharper. So what we're talking about, because we're talking about Vedanta, we're always talking about the epistemological issue. In other words, the awakening to this light, and fullness that is God. This light, the light aspect is wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah.
The warmth, the life aspect is the heart, isn't it?
Yes.
So when we're filled with the life of God, occasionally, if you notice that sometimes you can just be filled with, you get kind eyes. Do you know what I mean? You're looking kindly.
Yeah.
That is God's life obtaining in you as your life. It's non-dualistic. Do you know what I mean? But that then you're being moved by Ishvara, aren't you?
And I think that's been everybody's experience with Swami Dayananda, that he would
he was
have
like
a compassionate gaze. He was exactly like that.
He was like that. He was a beautiful human being. Because can there be wisdom without goodness, Prashant?
Nope.
It's not possible. A person can be very scholarly but not good.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So, and he was a very good being.
Yeah.
So the qualities of God were obtaining in him as his qualities, because it's non-dualistic, you know.
Yeah.
Non-dualistic.
It's almost, it's like you have this epistemological model, right? That you have truth and your belief, and the intersection is knowledge.
Yep. Sorry?
Like, this epistemological model of truth and belief, the intersection is knowledge, right? And here it almost seems that academic knowledge and goodness is what arises in wisdom. So it gives rise to wisdom in that sense.
Yes. See, the problem with the Christian tradition is they demanded belief without seeing.
Right, right.
In Vedanta, not everyone, but is that you see and then you believe.
Exactly.
But so that the epistemological issue of Vedanta is really important, because Swami Dayananda presents us with an epistemological method. In other words, the opening of the spiritual senses to spiritual facts.
Yes. And I think what makes this model very unique is that it emphasizes goodness as well. Because unless you have that goodness, the seeing will not happen.
Well, wisdom is the recognition of what is good. So
right.
You see, even when when you suddenly see that you are being unkind, you can't see that without the light of kindness. If you didn't see the good of kindness, you wouldn't see the unkindness.
Yes.
You see what I mean? So this whole area of opening up our lives to God is extremely important. So, but what we're looking at with Swami Dayananda is he has a God-centered psychology, because when our way of seeing is changed, our way of being automatically gets changed.
Yeah.
So if I see you as a real proper SOB, if I'm seeing you like that, Prashant, that seeing becomes embodied. I'm thinking thoughts about you, yes. So it's all conforming to my way of seeing you, isn't it?
Correct.
And when I'm seeing you as an SOB, am I seeing you through spiritual eyes?
Nope. It's
okay.
selective.
Okay. But when I because acceptance is alive in my heart, because this is what Swami Dayananda says, that this attitude born out of our understanding of Ishvara, which he calls graceful acceptance. When I'm being accepting, so I'm freed from, when I'm being accepting, I'm freed from a psychological reactivity. So I'm seeing you through kind eyes. That way of seeing is embodied in a way of being, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why Vedanta works, because when the vision is changed, how I see is changed, I change the way. If it's awakening to spiritual sight, seeing the spiritual good, seeing the good, that changes me.
Right. So it almost seems that all of problems of philosophy, whether you call it ontology or anything else, it's only epistemology. That's all that really matters, because epistemology also solves the ontological issue. Because now
That's
you
right.
know what reality is through epistemology.
In Vedanta, you find this very unique intersection between ontology, and which is the study of being, and
Right.
and epistemology, which is knowing. Because this is the we'll just end on this main point.
Yeah.
When I am being the knowing, that's non-dual, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when Swami Dayananda was just simply the quality of kindness, he was being what he was seeing.
Right.
He was being the knowing.
Yes.
And that changes people.
Yes.
That's the only thing that changes people, actually. So non-dualism is not some theoretical thing. Do you know what I mean? Non-dualism is when I am appreciating the fact that all that is here is the presence of God, and I'm living and I am being that knowing.
Yeah.
Then of course I am free, aren't I?
Yes. Yep.
That's non-dual knowledge. So it's not knowing about non-dual knowledge. It's an non-dual knowledge is embodied in a way of being in the world.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's just theological nonsense.
Correct. Beautiful. This was again, as always, mind blowing, very eye opening, and definitely something we continue. So hopefully, this gives us an impetus in the new year to start somewhat more regularly once again.
Next time we'll go into, when we talk about sameness, I talked about sameness in terms of Dharma.
Yeah.
Next time we'll go into sameness in terms of attitude, okay?
Let's do that.
Because
Excited already.
this will deal with the psychological resolution of certain problems.
Wonderful. Let's do that, BG. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
So
Thank you
thanks
very
for
much, Prashant.
yeah. Thank you. Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Hari Om. Bye.